Good morning, social studies students, Sec 3s. This is Mr. Seow, and this morning I want to teach you and run through the SRQ question 7, the weighing essay. In particular, we are focusing on chapter 7, which is responses to diversity. Before I begin, you should have your textbook with you. And on your textbook, chapter 7 begins on page 181. You should also have the set of notes that has been given to you the for issue 2 the essay notes. It looks like this. It begins with a concept table, and you can go to page 7, which is the start of chapter 7 on responses to diversity. And for chapter 7, it's actually quite a heavy going chapter. The notes run from page 7 all the way through page 12. So there are quite a number of pages of content about responses to diversity that you will have in your notes that can be used to respond to essay questions on chapter 7. Before I begin with the essay work, let's just do a quick recap. So issue 2 of social studies, and perhaps as I recap, you can write this down on your worksheet on a post-it or on at a blank space at the top of your worksheet. Issue 2 of chapter of social studies was about diversity. And diversity, we call, means differences. So differences between people. And we said that differences between people can emerge from social factors such as their race, their ethnicity, their religion, their nationality, and their socio-economic status. So therefore, in chapter 5, we talk about the factors shaping diversity. And we define that diversity means that when people have different race and ethnicity, religion, nationality, SES, all these things come together and they shape a diverse society. And then in chapter 6, we said, okay, right, since we've gotten this diverse society, what does that look like? And we talk about interactions in a diverse society. The whole chapter was about experiences and effects of diversity. I've shortened it to effects, but actually experiences also is involved because in a diverse society, you end up interacting with people from a different race, people from a different religion, people from a different country of origin, or people of different socio-economic status. People who are richer, who are poorer, who have jobs that pay higher incomes, there are specific skill sets required for those jobs. People of different jobs, in fact, of different industries. I'm a teacher, but my friends could be civil servants. They could be lawyers. They could be doctors. They could be engineers, and engineering is also diverse. They could be chemical engineers working in Jurong Industrial Estate, or they could be electrical engineers, or they could be civil engineers designing the Thomson East Coast Line Siglap station just outside my house. So there is a range of different jobs and occupations and skill sets and wealth. People who live in different sorts of housing, private housing, public housing. People who have different portfolios and different net worths. So there is a huge range of things that are different and people that are different from each other in this society. And what does that look like? How does that look like when I interact with someone from a different background, social milieu? So that's interactions. And through interactions, there are different effects. Well, there are positive effects, which is cultural exchange, cultural appreciation, knowledge exchange, and so on. But there are also negative effects. For example, prejudice, discrimination, um, competition for resources. So let me just maybe enumerate them because we have done this and it's a good recap. And you have your go-to examples. Remember that for each component of a chapter, for each heading in the chapter, you want to have at least one go-to example that you can pull out your back pocket. Because whenever an essay prompt comes up that that you want to respond to, simply having one go-to example will be sufficient for you to elaborate, extend the argument, and develop a coherent point, chain of reasoning that will develop a strong response to the essay prompt. So just off the top of my head, cultural exchange, we talk about different cultural practices and even fusions, like the nasi lemak burger. That's a nice, yummy, delicious cultural fusion between Malay culture with the nasi lemak chicken patty, the cucumber, the sambal chili, along with the Western burger concept that comes together to create the nasi lemak burger. And that's a cultural fusion product. And when we see that when different cultures come together, they make yummy things. And why is that good? Why is that positive? Because by having a fusion product that increases lifestyle options, people have more things to buy and consume and enjoy, or festivals as well. And when you enjoy more things, you want to look out and find out more about the other culture. That generates enthusiasm, appreciation, and respect for different cultures. And therefore, we see that diversity is a positive net benefit for the country, and that creates harmony and unity in society. And knowledge and skills. The example is Thermo Fisher. Pull out this example from your back pocket. Remember Thermo Fisher, this US biotech company, works with Singapore. They collaborated to come up with some COVID-19 ART and PCR test kits. And this is an example where people from different countries pool their knowledge and skills because they have different resources and different trainings in different countries. And through this knowledge and skills exchange, we create new technological innovations and products that can improve the standard of living in the country because these new products serve certain needs. They can boost the economy of a country because research and development increases the scientific quality of a country's products, and also attracts more skilled personnel to come to Singapore as a research hub. It also increases appreciation for people's diverse background and skills. That builds harmony and unity since we respect each other's technical ability, expertise, finesse. And then there are the negatives. Prejudice and discrimination. Poor example of a back pocket, right? We said there was the polytechnic lecturer that went up to an interracial couple and accused the man of saying that Indians shouldn't be dating Chinese girls. He got the races all wrong, but that was an example of racism. We also talk about the example of the Chinese gong lady. She saw the Indian man doing his prayer rituals at his house and she felt offended, and she took out a gong and she went gong gong gong, and that is another example of prejudice. And of course, these generate hurt, tensions, frustrations among people of different races. And when there is discrimination and racism, and rampant prejudice and negative acts towards people of other races, in fact, that generates ill will and tensions in the country and leads to people feeling unsafe and unhappy. Competition for resources. Primarily, this subtopic was framed in the concept of citizens and foreigners per se. The idea, there's a sense, a belief that when people from other countries come, they may seize resources from people who are local. Or what are these resources? They could be housing resources. They could drive up prices of goods. They could take up space in local transportation, public transport. And most egregiously, some people will say the most skilled foreigners, people holding employment passes, where you need to earn $5,000 a month or more to be here on an employment pass. They say, well, then you're taking our good jobs, right? Because the fact that you're holding an employment pass and earning means that you are earning $5,000 a month or more, which means you have that really nice plum job that should have gone to me, a local Singaporean, but it went to you instead. So you stole my job. And that is a common perception among potential job seekers in the country. And that could lead to frustration. And what we said was xenophobia, the sense that certain hatred or unhappiness towards foreigners. When we said that, in fact, this is not true, right? This is a flawed perception because far from the foreigner so-called taking your job, it could be that the job might not exist if not for the foreigner. Because sometimes when we want to develop the economy, we invite foreign companies to come and create new business ventures. For example, in One North, in the pharmaceutical pharmaceutical sector, there are lots of foreign companies that come and set up shop in Singapore. And by coming to Singapore to develop in Singapore as a center of research and sales, a regional business center, they are in fact creating maybe perhaps hundreds, thousands of jobs, of which some would be held by employees from their country. So the business, the company comes to set up in Singapore, they create hundreds of jobs, a portion of them will be held by people from their country, and then the remaining jobs go to local Singaporeans. So it is a flawed perception that the foreigner stole the job because the job might not exist if not for the foreigner. And in fact, we should in fact see, broadly speaking, the huge benefits that accrues when we get foreign labor, talent, and a workforce to support many different needs. Especially, I would say, in certain sectors where there is a shortage of eligible workers, the construction sector where Singapore is constantly building, but because these jobs are dangerous and tiring, not many locals might take them up. So in fact, many construction workers we see are in fact foreign workforce members holding work passes. Uh, and I could go on with other examples. Another one is healthcare, nurses in hospitals with an aging population. Singapore needs a higher number of nurses, but precisely because with an aging population, there are more aged people compared to younger working professionals in terms of the dependency ratio. And so precisely because of this, we need to have foreigners come in to take up certain jobs that support the higher proportion of elderly in our country. Okay. Sorry, that was a bit of a sidetrack. So if you want to review this video in the future, you can skip sort of minutes 4 to 12. But I think this was an important sidetrack because I'm showing you and modeling how in each of these parts I pull out an example from my back pocket. I can describe the factor, I can give an example, and I can explain the effects of and the implications of these examples. And then today we go into chapter 7, and I'm going to finish the framing finally. And 7 is about responses. And so, sort of, if I were to think about each chapter as a question, 5 would be what is diversity? And diversity is made up of these factors. And then 6 is okay, diversity. So what? So what does it mean? And then we say, oh, there are positive and negative things. And chapter 7 is okay, there are positive and negative things. So how do we respond? How do we address this? And if you think about responding to something that has both positive and negative, one simple rule of thumb is you should increase the positive and reduce the negative. So in other words, sort of as citizens or as the government, how do we increase the positive and reduce the negative? And that's why chapter 7 comes after chapter 6, because we have seen the positive and negative effects of diversity, and now we think from our standpoint and taking the perspective of different stakeholders, companies, governments, community groups, how do you increase the positive and decrease the negative? And in class, I would have given you this sort of 2x2 table where I showed you, broadly speaking, there are two groups, citizens and government. And then I talk about responding to social, cultural, and socio-economic diversity. So let me just put this here. So there's socio-cultural diversity, socio-economic diversity. And if you think about the mapping of the factors shaping diversity to these two diversities, social cultural will be everything from race and ethnicity, religion, nationality. All these go under social cultural. So all the problems we talk about in terms of prejudice, discrimination, and even competition for resources to some extent comes under social cultural. And then SES, diversity in socio-economic status in terms of wealth, occupation, education, that comes under socio-economic diversity. And we said that there are two groups of response. There's response by citizen and then by government. So this is sort of the matrix. It's easier to see in a tabular 2x2 table. And I will do that in class. But for the purposes of this worksheet, we will summarize it as bullet points. And the most important and the chunkiest and meatiest part of this chapter is that for each response, there are two sort of broad strategies and models we look at. And this is the chapter where we will venture past Singapore, perhaps for the first time, and we will look at models from other countries. So to social cultural diversity, uh, the responses by government will fall under this sort of dichotomy, and the country we look at is France. Okay, maybe I won't have so many brackets. Okay, so the country we look at is France, and we say sort of France versus Singapore, assimilation versus integration, and then for social economic diversity, the models of policies that we look at would be Sweden versus Singapore. So this would be government finance versus shared responsibility. And yes, I would encourage you to write this whole chunk down at the top of this notes, because this gives you a broad framing of the entire issue of diversity and helps you to recap how we got here to chapter 7, and gives you the basis of understanding of how we then write and craft a strong essay to answer some of the essay questions that will emerge. And I will cover all these concepts in class, but if you would like to read up ahead of time, or if in class you didn't really get it and you want to have something to read to digest, can I suggest that you go to the notes? There are a nice fat 6 pages of notes for you to understand the different responses. In particular, like I said, the government policies of assimilation and integration that respond to social cultural diversity, as well as the government policies of government finance and shared responsibility that respond to the question of socio-economic diversity. Yeah, this is a bit of a long intro for our usual essay question, but at the end, at the sort of the twilight of the issue, I thought this would be a useful way to wrap everything up. All right, so let me go now to the essay technique proper. If you want to, you pause and you go back to this and you take it down. So today we talk about the weighing essay. Question 7 is a weighing essay. It goes from vector to focus, and that is how we do our PU. And we start off right off the bat with an O-level question from 2021. The question says, do you think integration is more important than assimilation in managing social cultural diversity? Explain your answer. Well, right off the bat, some key terms jump out to us. We can analyze them. Analyze the essay question before I do it. Try, practice. And I hope you did do it before I'm doing it, because this is your chance to practice. And so here is factor 1, integration is factor 1, assimilation is factor 2, and managing social cultural diversity is the question focus. And when we talk about factor to focus, therefore, our first argument would be, well, integration is important in managing social cultural diversity. And the second factor would be assimilation is important in managing social cultural diversity. And as a quick one-liner recap, social cultural diversity refers to what we talked about in chapter 5 about different race, ethnicity, religion, nationality, right? People with different customs and practices and beliefs, and with this sort of mishmash, this nice variety of traditions and beliefs and practices and festivals, how do we get everyone on board the same page? How do we make sure we have a united and harmonious society? That's the idea of managing social cultural diversity. It is all about promoting unity and promoting harmony, and you can write that down. And so we craft the first PU. We say integration factor to focus. Integration is important in managing social cultural diversity. Or what is integration? Well, it's a flexible method of absorbing immigrants that requires a partial adoption of national culture. For example, the bilingual policy ensures that students learn both English and their mother tongue language. And in the examiner report for this 2021 marker national exam, the examiner did remark that a good range of examples were brought up by candidates in that year, including the bilingual policy, but also including other examples that are found in your textbook. Another good example to use are the common experiences between citizens, and this will be in your textbook. And I'm flipping, and this is in page 202, and you will see the nice gentleman here in the uniform, right? Because he's serving national service on page 202. And in your notes, it will be in page 9. And here you see some examples of common experiences in page 9 of your notes. So I encourage you to pull out some of these examples and think about how you would develop an argument. In this case, the example I chose for this essay was the bilingual policy, where students learn both English and their mother tongue. And let's think, how would this drive a good managing of social cultural diversity? In other words, how would this bring people of different cultural origins, backgrounds, and beliefs together? How would it bring people of different cultural origins, backgrounds, and beliefs together? And there are two components here. There's the English and there's the mother tongue. So I'm going to tackle them separately. First is the English. By learning English, you learn a common language. Why does that bring people together? Well, because they can talk. And when they can talk, they can make friends. And when they make friends, they feel a sense of belonging. They feel like, hey, this country treats me well. I want to contribute more to this country. So immigrants, and here I must clarify, immigrants are citizens. Immigrants are citizens. They are new citizens. They are people who come to stay in the long term. So when I use the word citizens in contrast to immigrants, it's a bit of a shorthand to say like citizens who have been here for many generations and immigrants who are coming in for the first generation. Is a bit of a shorthand. But immigrants are citizens. They are not foreigners in the sense that they come here as tourists and they're leaving after 10 days. No. Immigrants are people from a foreign country of origin, but they have chosen to make their home in Singapore. So people who come to Singapore to make their home here, but they were from a foreign country of origin, they have different backgrounds, different beliefs, different cultures, and they might be slightly different from sort of the Singaporean vibes and culture and practices we grew up with. What hawker center, what chopping seeds, what Singlish, what casuism, and so how do you bridge that gap? That is the question here. And English, by learning a common language, well, then we can talk. And when we talk, we exchange ideas, we make friends. Well, then these immigrants become more familiar with Singapore culture. I didn't develop all these arguments, but you could, right? You could. Because I have no space in the worksheet, but you could develop these arguments. So by acculturizing and acclimatizing to the people in Singapore, they become more like Singaporeans, and therefore that creates a sense of harmony and unity. Well, let me now tackle the mother tongue component. Furthermore, promoting mother tongue language. Well, how does that help the immigrants? Because they retain and preserve their cultural traditions. And here you might have some concrete examples, like maybe your school has Tamil mother tongue modules. And so immigrants from the southern provinces of India, from the southern states in India, from southern cities like from the southern state like Tamil Nadu of India or cities like Chennai. Well, they come to Singapore and they feel lost, but because mother tongue is being preserved in education, they feel like, hey, I have a stake, I have a sense of belonging. Not all my culture is going to be lost. I feel like I really like this country, and so this reduces pressure on immigrants to change. And on the other hand, from the perspective of locals, we celebrate like, hey, come to Singapore, you are bringing a different language, a different culture, new festivals, you're bringing something for us to celebrate, and we appreciate the diversity, and that allows for immigrants and Singaporeans to have even greater unity and harmony. And I haven't extended all these arguments out exactly as I said them, but you could. But you could. Right? You could write more, you could elaborate with great clarity on exactly what you mean from the different perspectives. Like, oh, on one hand, immigrants who come to Singapore and they see the mother tongue classes, they feel less pressure, they feel more welcome because part of their cultural identity is retained and promoted by these language lessons. And I gave you the example of immigrants from Tamil Nadu who come to Singapore and see Tamil classes, or immigrants from China who come to Singapore and see Mandarin classes, or immigrants from the Malay world, Malay speaking countries who come to Singapore and there are Bahasa classes. And from the perspective of Singaporeans, they feel that having immigrants coming in and joining in would enliven and enrich the cultural views because we already have these programs that encourage the teaching of mother tongue. All right. So integration, therefore, with its partial adoption, with its welcoming posture to immigrants, would be important in managing social cultural diversity. Okay. The other side. Can I invite you to pause? And I know some of you do this very much. I've seen your work, and some of you do not. But try. Pause the video for the next 5 minutes. Give yourself 5 minutes. Try to use your notes and craft an argument for assimilation for factor 2. And I hope you did that. So let's craft the argument together. And here, if you've already done it, you can write little notes at the side to improve your written argument, because this is how you learn. How you learn is when you try and you make a mistake, and that is good because making mistakes or leaving gaps then identifies the part where you didn't understand and helps you close the learning gap. And that's good. So assimilation is important in managing social cultural diversity. So assimilation is different from integration. It is a strict method that wants maximum adoption of the national culture. And here we said our example is France. And what does France do? Let's go mine. So all of France wants, it is compulsory for all immigrants to undergo French language courses. So everyone must speak French. There's no alternative. And so we can use this. This is a great example. It is compulsory for all immigrants to undergo French language courses. Immigrants may not wear, students may not wear large religious symbols in public places like schools. Cannot wear. Actually, it's not just students, sorry. So no one can wear. All right. So this is the examples I want to pick out, and I think you might see the angle of explanation I'm heading towards about how we manage social cultural diversity. As a result, I think the first part of the explanation can mirror what we say about integration. As a result, all immigrants would have a common language, French, to communicate with other citizens. This fosters greater communication and interactions between immigrants and citizens, allowing for friendships to be formed and immigrants to swiftly participate in social events. Furthermore, the banning of religious symbols means that all citizens are seen to be equal, thus, and have a common national belief. The erosion of differences thus promotes greater equality and unity among citizens, fostering social harmony. Because you don't wear your religious symbols, right? It wouldn't be the case, for example, in France, which is a majority Christian country. It wouldn't be the case that everyone is wearing crosses, and as an immigrant, if you're not Christian, you feel a bit left out, right? Because no one is wearing these crosses, because it's illegal to wear these religious symbols. So no one will feel left out, everyone will be equal, everyone will be seen as the same. And I didn't really have space in this worksheet to extend the argument out about, social inclusion, social exclusion, visible symbols of belonging, right? You don't allow them to wear that, so everyone is really the same. I didn't have the space in this worksheet to write that, but you could develop that argument in your homework. And I hope this is clear, and you will copy question 7a on foolscap, both paragraphs as well as the weighing. And let's look at weighing, and I'll spend about 5 minutes on weighing, and then we are done. So weighing has two approaches. One is about the stronger factor approach, and one is the balanced conclusion approach. And we have done both in the past. But for this particular chapter, I put to you that it is easier to do the stronger factor approach, because assimilation and integration are really different policies. They are different in principle, and if and they're adopted by different countries. So it's like Singapore does integration and France does assimilation. And it's not like you can toggle between the two, because you have chosen a national approach. So it is very tricky to talk about a balanced conclusion that they are both equally important, because in fact they will not be simultaneously practiced in any country. Either the country is going for integration, or the country is going for assimilation, and they are not sort of having a mix of the two. So ultimately, for this particular question construction, it is clearer to come down hard on one side and say, hey, I believe this is the way to go. And there is no answer that is always correct, right? And I'll demonstrate to you now in the weighings that both angles can be taken. It's a matter of perspective. And the credit is given to candidates, to students who can explain clearly why one factor is better than the other. So there must be some sort of deeper criteria, as we say, the deeper criteria. So let's go and label. I start with integration. So I could say, and this is the weighing, I could say integration is more important than assimilation. Why? Because integration is nicer. Integration is nicer. It's about openness. It's like, hey, we are already a diverse country, and we welcome even more diversity, because diversity adds to our strength. And what is one example? We recognize different cultural origins and traditions. We have mother tongue languages that cater to people from different countries with different mother tongues. And so integration in Singapore is really about welcoming, celebrating, and promoting diversity. And this creates an ethos of openness, a sense that, oh, we do want more people from different cultures to add to our diversity and strength. And with this ethos at the national level, citizens imbibe this ethos, and in our exchanges and interactions, we also have a similar approach to immigrants. And that creates a welcoming atmosphere for immigrants from the government and citizens, and therefore reduces the tensions, lubricates the interactions, and creates a more united society, even with the addition of immigrants who are from different diverse cultural national origins. Conversely, assimilation foists the majority culture wholesale on immigrants. You force them to throw away all their old languages and learn French now. There is a close-minded social ethos that rejects diversity. No, we don't want different religious symbols. No, we don't want different languages. We only want French. And this might create tensions, because immigrants are forced to change, right? Adapt, learn French today. They may resent the loss of their traditions, and citizens may hold unrealistic expectations. Hey, why is that person not speaking French? And by having these unrealistic expectations and pressures to conform, this creates a pressure cooker environment. It's easy to generate social tensions between people who are slightly different. There is the close-minded ethos here, and that is perhaps a foundation for misunderstandings to occur. And so, on the whole, in this construction of the weighing paragraph, by um by virtue of the ethos generated by the government policy, the social ethos, integration seems to be a more appealing approach, because citizens and the government are more open-minded to the diversity, and that creates a greater basis for unity. Well, then can we reverse? Sorry, before we reverse, can we annotate? So this is the stand. This is the deeper criteria. This is the strengthening of 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 the argument for integration, and this is the weakening of the argument for assimilation. All right, so this is one approach to say, hey, integration is better because of the social ethos is facilitating. Integration more open-minded ethos, assimilation close-minded. And then there was the other angle of assimilation. So how do I argue assimilation is more important? Well, because in the long run, assimilation does expect a certain measure of equality. Like everyone is really going to be French. Everyone's going to speak French. Everyone's going to believe in the French soccer team. Everyone's going to reject the use of religious symbols in public spaces. In the long term, here meaning over multiple generations. Because all immigrants are forced to adapt. And yes, it is painful at the start, but actually we are playing the long game here, because in the long term, by the second generation, by the third generation, right? When your children and grandchildren are born in France and they live and they grow and they breathe French air and French thoughts and French language and bonjours and so on, then they are no different from the other French citizens. They are completely the same. And because they're completely the same, they will be equal. They will be united. They are together. There's no difference now. It's all been erased. The first generation, yeah, they're going to have some pain in adjusting, but that's fine. We are sacrificing them. They chose to come to France, right? They're immigrants. They chose to come. So we sacrifice them. We make them adapt, and their children and grandchildren will be fully integrated. They'll be fully part of the country. They'll be fully assimilated. Whereas here is the criticism of integration. Whereas integration allows people to sort of keep their cultural traditions, and so there is some measure of cultural distance. It may not be much, but there is cultural distance, and this lasts over generations. And by having this cultural distance that lasts over generation, perhaps these immigrants will be prevented from fully participating in the country. There will be some differences, some subgroups, speaking different languages, having different beliefs, different practices. And because there will always exist these subgroups, in the long run, it will not be as equal a country as France. And that is the trade-off. That is the trade-off that Singapore chooses. But by adopting a more welcoming, open, and tolerant posture towards immigrants and their diverse practices from the country of origin, by having this more tolerant posture towards immigrants, diverse practices from country of origin, the trade-off is over 3-4 generations, you will not see the same cookie cutter unity that you will see in France. Analyze. This is the stand. This is the criterion. This is the strengthen the other factor and weaken the first factor. And so this chapter is not about saying Singapore is the best. It's not. It is about looking at different models by which we adapt to diversity, adjust to diversity, approach diversity, and which model entails what trade-offs. And this weighing paragraph for this national exam question is very rich because it forces the candidate to think about the trade-offs that we have chosen in Singapore by adopting the integration model. What are the trade-offs we are going to live with as opposed to France, right? As opposed to someone with a different model. Work 7A, P1, P2, and either weighing paragraph, whichever speaks to you. In fact, if you want to try the balanced conclusion approach, you can. I don't see a very clear pathway here, but if you want to try, go ahead, see if you can convince me to give you the L4. And then the other three questions, please label the factor and the foci. Minimally, I will assign every class 7B. It's another O-level question. And this time, this one is about socio-economic diversity. Please label it at the side as you annotate the factor and focuses. Please label this at the side. So for every class, minimally I'll assign 7A and 7B. And depending on how much runway we have, I might also assign the other essay questions as homework. So I hope this run through has been useful. We have done quite a bit. We have summarized the whole issue. I've recapped the whole issue to diversity, right? How we got here to responses to diversity. I've recapped how to analyze the question. I've recapped how to craft a pure argument, and I've talked about, in particular, weighing by going for a stronger factor approach. I hope this lesson has been useful. Students, see you next time.